Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of TI Talks by TechInformed. I am Ricky, and today I am joined by our editor, James Pearce. Welcome to the podcast, James, after a long break.
I know, I'm sure everyone was missing me. No, it's good to be back.
We're glad to have you back.
It's just been a busy time, and Nicole and Anne-Marie were doing such a great job catching up that I think they've overtaken me in the popularity stakes. But I'm back to win my place as a podcast guest.
So later on in the episode, we are going to be joined by the founder of Code Red Partners, Tom Alcock, who is going to talk to us all about the cybersecurity recruitment space and how we go about retaining staff in the cybersecurity space. A very hot topic at the moment, especially jumping off of the back of our Cyber Week last week. We had so much cyber content, I couldn't fit it all into one podcast, so I've had to split it into two. But we're not going to talk about cybersecurity the whole podcast. First, we're going to talk about someone else who's been in the news a lot for the last couple of weeks, and actually, I guess, a couple of years in general, unfortunately. Elon Musk and X, formerly Twitter. Now, there's been a lot of furore in the media, mostly on X, in the last couple of weeks about X being banned in Brazil. And it's all to do with the proliferation of misinformation and disinformation and all the other kinds of non-factual stuff that is spread on the app, especially pertaining to elections or election material in Brazil. James, can you tell the listeners or watchers a little bit more about what happened?
Yeah, so it stems back to Brazil's controversial presidential election a couple of years ago. As has happened in other elections, we've seen it in the US elections, we saw some of it it being brought up in the UK elections as well. There's a lot of accusations about misinformation or disinformation, basically false information being shared on the platform, and in this case by political figures who were linked with former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. Basically, a Supreme Court judge in Brazil had basically said that X needed to take down some of the content or ban some of the profiles, which they refused to do. They've refused to do this in a lot of places, and it's an area of dispute for them. The argument that they put forward is that they are defending free speech, and they shouldn't be forced to ban accounts. Basically, the judge said they needed to assign some representation and local representation in Brazil. Elon Musk and the other people who run X Twitter, that's a good name for it, X Twitter, because that's literally what it is, X Twitter, basically refused to appoint somebody, so the judge put an order temporarily banning the platform across the entirety of Brazil. Obviously, Elon Musk was not happy about this. He tweeted, he's accused the judge of being all sorts of things, but that ban has now been upheld by the entire Supreme Court. Yeah, so that's the initial kind of background of what's going on, and it's dragged in Elon Musk's other companies. It's been a hot topic of conversation on the platform itself, but it's needless to say that Elon is not a happy chappy.
He has been relentless on X. His posts for the last 3 or 4 days, he's just constantly attacking Alexander Moraes.
But it's very much in keeping with the situation that X has been in since Musk bought it a few years ago. He said that he was going to kind of reposition it as the town square, that place where people could go and express any opinions no matter what. And there's been a lot of steps towards that in terms of he's reinstated some accounts that were banned for controversial reasons, whether it be, Donald Trump obviously is the perfect example of it. He was initially banned after the January 6th incident and then had his account reinstated, although he didn't use it for a while because he had his own social media platform, and then recently did an interview with Musk and started suddenly tweeting again. And it's a real problem for a lot of governments because they want to be supporters of free speech, but it's where you stand on kind of free speech. Free speech isn't necessarily the freedom to say anything without consequences. When it becomes political, it becomes really, really complex. And the argument that Musk puts forward is that you are swaying politics and you're abusing power in doing so.
I guess it's where you determine the line is drawn on free speech. It does have limitations, but I guess people like Elon Musk, who describe themselves as free speech absolutionists, don't believe it does have any limitations. But I feel like, from my perspective, that's just kind of like a cover up to allow you to say whatever you want and not have any consequences. But
We do accept that there's limitations. Like, we accept limitations on speech all the time. Musk is notorious for suing other people who he feels have libeled him or his companies. He does it all the time. I mean, if you believe in free speech as an absolute and you don't believe there should be any limitations, you can't have libel. Because you can't libel someone because they should be free to say it. There should be no consequences. And, it ties into the wider picture with X as to what's going on. You obviously wrote an amazing piece the other week about X's relationship with its advertisers ever since Elon took over. It just seems like since he went in there, they've had endless battles and endless troubles.
it's difficult, really, because it's a platform that, like, people kind of, it's almost, the impression is that people are kind of almost waiting for it to kind of like go back to how it was or get better. They're kind of like, there's a bit of reluctance for like users to leave the platform, although there are some leaving. But in terms of like advertisers, they're kind of like, I don't want to use the word like fleeing, but like quite a few are kind of, pulling their funding for ads on the platform because, I mean, rightfully so, they don't want their adverts appearing next to, hate speech or, really just horrible content that is now pretty standard procedure on X, unfortunately. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what happens in terms of how it's replaced in Brazil. Obviously, a lot of people are moving to Blue Sky. It got like, I think, 500,000 signups sort of in the 2 days after X was banned.
Wiser people than me have touted the death of Twitter in the last few years more often than not. They've said several times, it's been like, that'll kill it off, that'll kill it off, that'll kill it off. It's still standing.
I guess it's a question of how long it can coast on legacy.
Because lots of people aren't leaving it still. I haven't left it yet.
I'm this close.
Well, maybe next time we talk about it on a podcast, one of us will have fled.
Last week, I spoke to Tom Alcock, who is the founder of Code Red Partners, who specialize in searching for executives and hiring in the cybersecurity space. And he gave me a very interesting interview all about the recruitment side of cybersecurity and how hiring managers in firms can prevent their cybersecurity team from leaving and breaking bad, as it were. So over to you, Tom. So today I am joined by Tom Alcock, founder at Code Red Partners. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. Pleased to be here.
Just to start us off, would you mind giving us like a short introduction of who you are and what Code Red Partners does?
Absolutely. Yeah, and thanks for the invite to speak on TI Talks. Really excited to have kind of jump in and discuss all things cyber with you today. I'm Tom Alcock. I'm the founder of Code Red, as mentioned. I've been in staffing and consulting now for coming up to 15 years. I've done on both sides of the pond. So I started my career in the UK and then moved to Denver, Colorado, 2020, where I kind of run a large team across North America. We exist to help bridge the cybersecurity talent gap, helping household technology companies that we know pretty well in building and scaling security teams and programs.
Often at TechInformed, we always talk about what happens after someone's been breached, after there's been an attack. We thought it'd be quite an interesting perspective to kind of hear what happens, before that. So I guess if we start like right at the beginning in terms of sort of sourcing and retaining talent, what kind of channels do you think are the best method or methods do you think are most effective for finding cybersecurity talent?
Front of mind for CISOs. A lot of the panel conversations, a lot of the kind of the sidebar conversations that I'm having continue to be around talent. Whilst kind of tools and innovation are helping us solve some of the most complex problems that we see in cybersecurity, talent still continues to be one of the hardest problem vectors for CISOs and general kind of security and IT executives. So it's a shared responsibility and it's hard to do. But to answer your question, I see companies doing it very well. There's a lot of high bar tech companies that look to do the typical 3 to 4, maybe Ivy League or high-end universities that specialize in computer science, that then go straight into maybe do a year or two within that kind of FANG organization, and then they look to hire it. There's only such a finite pool of really great resources like that. And so we have to look past that type of profile. Like that, they are exceptional and they add value to a lot of the companies that we know. But I think that getting your foot in the door in cybersecurity is so challenging for many. And so some of the best hiring managers or teams that I've seen grown are open to hiring unconventionally. People that maybe are wanting to break into cyber, but they're currently in like an IT support role or a DevOps role, SRE, cloud or infra, and have the technical chops to start with that then can grow into maybe a security program. But for many of these CISOs and VPs of security, it's a risk that they take by kind of training them up. But in my opinion, it's a really good and valued risk.
Yeah, I think in terms of like just hiring, I mean, maybe you can speak to this as well, but I think just in terms of hiring in general nowadays, especially with sort of the introduction of AI into the world, there's a lot more emphasis on skills-based kind of like recruitment as opposed to, certifications specifically. And I wonder if that translates into the cyberspace as well, like kind of what you just said, but like how important are like, Ivy League educations and certificates versus practical experience?
Yeah, and that's I actually got a really nice story that I can share with you, which is based on that. There's a I won't say the name of the company, but they're late stage IPO. They're in the AI ML data lake space. They will IPO in the next couple of years. We built out a lot of their teams. One of the best hires that they've made in recent years was they've got a really successful bug bounty program. And the person on the side of the company that was facing off on the bug bounty program kept on interacting with this young man out in France who turned out to be 18 years of age, kept on finding vulnerabilities, kept on updating some of the vulnerabilities he found by the bug bounty program. Communication went back and forth for some time. He ended up saying, "Would you be interested in kind of joining us?" And that is such an unconventional track to hire somebody through that. But it's an incredible mind with real world experience that's finding true vulnerabilities in the platform. And it goes back to what I mentioned a second ago, which is people willing to take a risk on that person. And that person now is like running a lot of the red team efforts, is actually now supporting the bug bounty program in general. And it shows that it's experience over kind of academics at times. And I think there's a lot of people that come from that kind of like DEF CON hacker background that didn't start with either the academics or the certifications and just started building up a network and bug bounty. There's the companies like HackerOne and BugCrowd have done an incredible job of raising that kind of profile for a lot of these people that now are some of the best minds in security and certainly in the hacking world.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective. So take a step forward now. You've hired your, your best talent. You've got the best cybersecurity team going. I think there's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe allure, I should say, from maybe using those skills and those that experience gains working in cybersecurity to maybe flip. And we've at TechInformed, we've written about that before, how some cybersecurity employees have broken bad, as it were, and have kind of been tempted by illicit opportunities on the dark web. What kind of things do you, and also particularly when you look at sort of cybersecurity in the public sector versus private sector, the kind of salaries and stuff involved there, what kind of things can companies do and what kind of work environments can they create that would deter employees from being tempted like that?
Yeah, and you make a really good point. We've seen those trends happen over the last 5 years. There's people that have side gigs where they're advising startups, where they're advising security product companies to help move the product forward. That's a great use of time to be moonlighting and earning money on the side. There is people that maybe have wrong intentions, and the dark web is a good place to earn revenue. But I think 5-10 years ago, I think it was a lot more commonplace. I think there's so much depth now. I'm hiring for a company right now on the red team. They're doing deep checks on a lot of the red team before they kind of come in, just to check that they're not, that they don't have kind of some of the past, at least criminal records, and then doing some of the kind of work online. I think some of the internal threat and investigations team and threat intelligence in some of these companies and insider risk programs have really become mature over kind of the last 5 years, maybe even probably a little bit longer than that. But as a lot of these attacks are coming from insider risk, and a lot of them coming through the kind of customer service desk, I think there's a huge emphasis being pushed on involved in malicious actors internally and putting kind of guardrails in place to support that. And then just being mindful about some of their employees, giving the opportunity to work on interesting challenges, because it's not all about the money. For some people it is. Like if you're in a public sector role and you're lower paid, there is an opportunity for you to go and find something else there that is maybe, say, slightly higher paid. But for a lot of these people, they're tinkerers, they're hackers. So whilst they like the money, they also like the problems and things like kind of there's great hackathons in companies that working on internal challenges that keep them motivated and keep their mind active and working on the bleeding edge of technology. I don't think it's always people are looking for that big payday. I just think some people are bored. And if you look at some of the big hacks in the last couple of years, these aren't people that maybe are just chasing cash. It's just people to see. It's the prestige, of hacking and then being able to announce it. The Uber one announcement comes to mind as a big one. And so it's about keeping people with these incredible minds and skill sets, kind of keep putting them in environments where they can do greater good and advance the community rather than be on the dark web and maybe take advantage from certain situations.
Cool. Okay, cool. Interesting. And to that effect, what type of cybersecurity roles do you see becoming sort of increasingly popular or critical in the next kind of few years? Or are there any kind of trends of roles that maybe weren't there a few years ago that we're seeing more now?
Yeah, and you said the buzzwords at the front end of this conversation. Like AI and ML security is front and center of a lot of conversations. I've been pretty fortunate to do both B-side San Francisco, Seattle this year. I did a talk at Seattle, which involved AI and ML hiring. I was at RSA and then Black Hat. If you weren't in a queue and heard somebody saying the words AI and ML with security tagged on, you weren't at the conference. And so there isn't the skill set right now. We've recently placed a AI security research lead, which is a long title for somebody. And there's not many people out there. We had to go down truly unconventional routes to identify this type of person because they want a PhD candidate that can write high-level research papers, can bridge the community from the company, so the cybersecurity community in terms of some of the vulnerabilities that are found, but has the hacker mindset. And so having a deep academics and a breaker mindset, there's a pretty finite pool. And so I think that there's a lot of people that are coming through the education piece that are doing either researcher roles that want to move into security. I think that's going to be a big opportunity in the next couple of years is talking about some of the research that they're finding and the vulnerabilities within AI and ML. I think that's definitely kind of one big one. I'm seeing tools build up on the AI side of the house that maybe are alleviating some of the tier one SOC analyst role. And I think that will give more coverage across the tier one. So I think the popular track will be people moving to tier two, tier three, and then running overall programs with tools. And we're, as an agency, we're just so busy with hardware security roles right now, physical products, and actually adding a security element to that. And the other pillars of just general security engineering, AppSec, CloudSec, IR, and detection. But yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest trend that we've kind of seen. And I mentioned about bridging the community piece. I've seen a lot of companies doing it really well right now. And a lot of these are security vendors where rather than having a salesperson just rocking through cold calls and kind of do this old-fashioned outreach campaign, they're now bringing in a researcher. There's an incredible researcher named Clint Gibler at SEMGRAP that does a great job of this. And what he does, he has a newsletter, he's on regular podcasts, and is able to talk about the challenges and the finds that SEMGRAP have found. And every time he's on a conference talk, he's wearing the SEMGRAP badge. So it's a really unique kind of user researcher, practitioner-led sales, but it's really becoming front and center because that kind of user community and networks like B-Sides, where a lot of these people are buying tools and building trust and integrity in the wider security program.
Interesting. Okay. So from your perspective as well, from like a recruit perspective, you have a wide knowledge of kind of, what all the roles are and also like what their salaries are, etc. And also the turnover of retention. Where do you think businesses should be focusing their hiring investments right now? And also, in your opinion, in the whole cybersecurity team, like which role is the MVP?
You put me on the spot now, Ricky. It depends, is my answer, right? It's definitely like horses for courses. I've done a couple of talks the last couple of years, which is, let's say that there's a Series A startup with no security. We'll typically make that first head of security, which really the generalist that can sit across all silos and pillars of security until there's enough budget to hire either tools or people. Application security for a lot of the companies that I do work with is such an important pillar of security, kind of baking security into the development lifecycle. There's a general awareness piece, vulnerability management. SDLC really is what a lot of companies need. And that's a great starting block. If you can build software and security and application security into the program, you can then like hire in cloud people. If there's an element of kind of go to market, then we can bring in a compliance person to help with SOC 2 Type 2, ISO 27001. But I think that's a really good foundation, and it's a good gateway to be a security generalist, which, to answer your question, is probably superpower. And there's only probably a handful of people that I know that can do that role really, really well. And they're either fully employed and compensated insanely, or they run their own businesses in the security product space.
Cybersecurity is kind of often maybe criticized for a lack of diversity. And I wonder, what benefits do you see in having a more diverse team in cybersecurity? And how would a business go about attracting a more diverse talent pool?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Diversity is so important to cybersecurity. If our org that me and you work in are all, let's say, white males between the ages of 30 and 40, we see the world in theory with a certain lens. And I know that's a debate to be had, but we need people that break cultural boundaries, kind of from different geographies, from different social economic backgrounds, because to see a different view of the hacker mindset. The hacker is truly diverse. So many different places around the world, from very wealthy hackers that just go after that high-end business or opportunity, to people that just are bored and broke and they're just trying to play about. And so to really beat these adversaries, we need to have diverse teams that see the world in different views and think in the shoes of the hacker. So to answer your question, I think that it's absolutely imperative that people build diverse teams, hire unconventionally, are open-minded to the types of people that are on the team. Because, like I say, if we just hire with the same kind of track, we're not really kind of moving anything forward. And genuinely, I think it creates vulnerabilities or gaps because we think we know what we know. That creates a longer term problem in terms of culture, awareness, and general risk.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, Tom.
Yeah, this is great, Ricky. It's really nice to meet you. And thanks for all the work you're doing in terms of kind of bringing kind of cybersecurity to the kind of the wider masses. It's really appreciated.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Tom Alcock there. James, what do you think?
That was really, really interesting. It's such a space we write about so often on TechInformed cybersecurity because it's so important to so many businesses. I thought what he was saying about keeping staff engaged was really, really interesting. Obviously, we've written stories before about staff that broke bad, if you like, kind of gone down the route of engaging, hacking themselves and committing illegal activities. And I mean, I used to live with a penetration tester, so an expert hacker is a really good friend of mine, but it's known to say that the thing he enjoys is he enjoys breaking things and kind of that challenge. And sometimes that would be a kind of, I can see where the temptation would lie to do something a little bit naughty sometimes. And a lot of his friends who I'd met, you know, they might have stories about things where they've kind of strayed that line. The fact is, if you that's your instinct, you need to keep people engaged in order to keep them away from that. And I thought what Tom said about that was really, really interesting.
But on that note, we must draw this episode to a close. So thank you again to Tom for joining us. And thank you, James, for co-hosting this episode with me.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun to come back and talk all things Elon and hacking. not together. We're not hacking you, Elon, we promise.
I'm sure somebody's trying somewhere. But yeah, so we will see you again soon. Thank you again for listening to this episode of TI Talks. Until the next time, stay informed.